Now let's begin a discussion with experts from around the world to break down some issues making headlines. After weeks of will they or won't they and relentless pledges that it would go ahead as planned, the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games have been pushed back to 2021 in light of the COVID-19 outbreak. But given the pandemic, the decision was met with shock but also relief. But what does this mean for the athletes who had been planning their whole lives around this summer? Not to mention the sheer cost and logistics of rearranging the 16-day event with tens of thousands of staff, volunteers and millions of spectators readjusting their schedules. Today we have joining us British journalist Tariq Panja, who is a London-based sports reporter for the New York Times. We also have Jerry Ling, Chief of Staff at World Taekwondo, who was the head of Games Planning and Director of Sports Services during the Pyeongchang 2018 Olympic and Paralympic Games. Well, let's start with you, Tariq. The IOC Tokyo 2020 organisers and Japanese officials have been insisting for weeks and weeks that the 2020 Games would go ahead as planned, despite widespread criticism. But why did Tokyo and the IOC suddenly change their tone all of a sudden, and why did it take so long?
I think in the end they realised they couldn't hold the line, which was looking more and more ridiculous as the pandemic unfolded. Large swathes of the world are in a lockdown situation. It's unprecedented, this scale now, in the sense, I'm sitting here in London, you've got all of India today in a lockdown, the United States. The idea that in just a few months we can have a sporting event which would bring, as you mentioned earlier in your show there, in your piece, thousands of athletes, spectators, media, etc., into what would be a giant petri dish, while there is this lingering fear of a pandemic situation, just seemed unrealistic. And crucially, in the last week, the athlete voice started to be heard, and they were enraged. The most interesting, for me, the most interesting person to speak was Hayley Wickenheiser, who is a member of the IOC's own athlete commission, a highly decorated Canadian athlete. She said, this is an IOC insider, that this thing must be postponed. It would be irresponsible to go on. And there have been messages like that since. The two most decorated US sporting teams, most famous ones, the track and field and the swimming teams, they called for postponements, as did the World Track and Field body. The dam had broken. This had to be done.
So athletes themselves have been calling for a postponement. And, well, now that it's happened, it's uncertainty ahead of them. And Jerry, well, now that these games have been postponed to 2021, what comes next for these athletes? And can all of them keep their Olympic dreams alive?
Yes, it is a challenge for them, actually, because a lot of them actually are not very, I would say, well endowed in terms of financial situation. And not all of them have sponsorships, I would say. So for them to suddenly be told that they have one more year to go, and some of them have even taken loans from their parents, loans from banks, and skip school, So these are things where it is a very tough situation for them. So on top of all this financial situation, we must also remember that this is the first time ever in peacetime. And in this 124-year history of constant Olympic Games, so this means that nobody has ever encountered this situation before. So this is, as we all say, an unprecedented situation. And for the athletes themselves, now, not only the financial part, but looking back, 4 years of hard work, some of them maybe even 8 years, and there's a lot of stress on them. There's a lot of mental health and psychological burden on them. So this is something which they also have to overcome. So they are overcoming a lot of factors here.
Right, and it seems that they've been very understanding about this decision, given the global spread of the coronavirus. And, well, a lot of them are saying that, the Tokyo officials and the IOC have made the right decision to postpone. But Tariq, what are some of the logistical and financial problems ahead of the postponed Olympics?
Thomas Park, we spoke to him shortly after the decision was made, and he described it as a complex jigsaw puzzle. I mean, he could say that again. This for me is, aside from a war, this might be the most complex human feat to put together. That's why it takes place every 4 years. It's so hard to get all the pieces in place, even in normal times. Now you have this kind of emergency scenario, as Jerry alluded to. This has never happened before. The Olympics have never been postponed before. You have complexities across the board. You have qualification systems for the athletes that need to be redesigned. You've got a doping system that needs to be designed from now. And then in terms of infrastructure, you have the kernel of the Olympics, the heartbeat of it, which is the athlete village. That block of flats, that real estate is due to be sold in 2023, or it's already being sold. It's due to be occupied by the people who bought those apartments in 2023. That's a complication. Finding a date that will suit TV companies, the athletes, and sports like Jerry's. These are 33 different world championships essentially that take place at the Olympics, and they had their own plans for 2021. The list is endless, so we could go on for the rest of your show, but this is an extremely complex thing to try and do in such a short period of time.
Just so an endless list of things that need to be rearranged and reshuffled throughout this whole process. And well, Jerry, your athletes have actually been affected by this. So Taekwondo has been on the Olympic program since 2002, but the upcoming games were actually set to be very special because Taekwondo was going to make a debut at the Paralympic Games as well. So how has this postponement decision affected your federation and your athletes?
Yes, indeed. Since Sydney 2000, this has always been, this is supposed to be our 6th Olympic Games, consecutive ones. And for the first time, we are going to be in the Paralympic Games, and we are one of the few IFs, the international federations, to have this privilege. But at the same time, with this postponement, the first thing that we looked at is, of course, the welfare of our athletes, because a lot of them, as I mentioned earlier just now, they are not really sure what to do next, and also they have some financial situation. So what we are doing now is to develop online education programs for them to help them to cope with the mental aspect, and also to work with our partners to possibly give them internships and further education and self-improvement, while helping them to find a way to get over financially. But from the World Taekwondo perspective, we have to look at our calendar. And next year, we have our World Championships in May in China. And that is obviously going to be postponed because we do not expect to have the World Championships before the Olympic Games. Once again, it has never been done before, so everybody has to adapt. That has been the message from the IOC and from the IOC president. And as an international federation, this is what we stand in solidarity for. Every single federation has to adapt, and we are no different.
So athletes and other sporting events as well, they're also being affected by the IOC's decision. And well, most people assume that the Games will be held around the same time next year, around July or August. But of course, this would clash with other major sporting events as well. And the IOC president said that earlier dates could be possible. And well, Tariq, do you think there's a chance that we'll be having an earlier Olympics in April or May instead of July or August?
Well, I think until the decision is signed off and sealed and announced, there is a chance. But if I had $100, I would be putting 90 of those on a July-August situation, albeit that's going to cause a huge problem for the World Track and Field World Championship and FINA's the Swimming World Championships. But both of those organizations, I noticed in the minutes and hours after the decision to postpone, said they would work with the IOC and would consider figuring out if they could move theirs. The World Track and Field body has been a bit more direct about that. Sebastian Coe said yet they would be willing to do it and have spoken to the U.S. host city, Oregon, Eugene in Oregon about this. So that's a possibility. But there are advantages to spring, April and March and April. One, and a big one, is the weather. It won't be as searingly hot at that time of year as it would be in Tokyo. And that remains a concern and remained a concern until this postponement. Let's not forget, organizers were forced to move the venue for the marathon to Sapporo because there were fears over heat. But let me just say, if you move this to a period around May, April, around that time, you're going to clash with big European soccer, the United States sports season is still on. So if I'm a broadcaster who has spent billions, quote unquote NBC, do I want to have these sports competing with this event that I've paid for?
If I can also add in one point here, because this morning we had a call with the IOC president, all the international federations, and obviously the dates were the main concern, and this is something which we will still continue to have a dialogue with the IOC. I would say that the decision will not be too long. So this is something which, as Tariq just mentioned, this is such a huge undertaking. So we look forward to working with the IOC, but then at the same time, once a decision has been made, the domino effect will fall, and then all the pins will drop in the sense that all the IFs will then have to start looking at their own calendars, and the athletes will then have to adjust their own training regimes, their own competitions. So this is something which hopefully we can get everything on track again, because coming back to the athletes, they have lost a lot of revenue from competing. They have lost a lot of chances to train. So we just wish that all of them can be healthy, but at the same time have an opportunity to compete and to train and to fulfill their Olympic dreams and also Paralympic dreams in our case.
Could I ask Jerry?
Postponing the Tokyo Olympics, it was an inevitable decision, but still quite a headache for everyone involved. But hopefully it will all come together. Well, I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. But thank you so much for joining the programme, Tariq Panja in London and Jerry Ling in Seoul.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is also where we end the show. Thank you for watching, and we hope you tune in with us next week for more global insights on issues making headlines. Goodbye.